Thank you, Lisa, if you do the magic for me. So good evening and welcome to everybody for this Cabinet meeting for Torbay Council on the 12th of July. May I remind colleagues that this is a hybrid meeting, so those here are able to vote who are members of the Cabinet. However, members of the public and also elected members are able to join us virtually. Elected members are able to pose questions virtually, but if there were any who were potentially voting members, they're not able to vote virtually. So, colleagues, may I advise people that we're not anticipating a fire this evening, so if the alarms go off, it's potentially even hotter, and we need to leave the building from the front and assemble in the car park on Lymington Road. Can I encourage colleagues, as I am now, to make sure that all devices are either turned off or switched to silent to aid the meeting. Lisa, do we have any apologies?
Chairman, I have no apologies from your Cabinet members.
Thank you. So we have minutes from the last meeting that have been circulated. I'm happy to propose them as a true and accurate record. Darren, are you happy to second?
Happy to second.
Okay. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. We then go on to declarations of interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. This is both for elected members and officers of the council. Does anybody have any declarations that they may wish to lodge?
Nobody's indicated, Chairman.
Thank you. We now go on to communications, and we have just passed, like yesterday was the last day of Srebrenica Memorial Week, but it seemed today was the most appropriate council meeting for us to take the opportunity to commemorate Srebrenica. Councillor Councillor, I understand you have a few words to share for us.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so this year's Srebrenica Memorial Week took place from the 4th to the 11th of July, and this year's theme is combating denial and confronting hatred. Despite the fact that genocide was committed in Europe, denial of Srebrenica genocide, as well as the crimes against humanity committed across Bosnia and Herzegovina between 1992 and 1995, remains prevalent. Denial brings not only more pain and suffering for the survivors, but it serves as a rallying call to continue the division and hatred as well as to glorify the murders. In the UK, communities are only too aware of the damaging impact that denial can have for individuals and community cohesion. Divisive propaganda and misinformation is thriving, and clear and established facts are denied and manipulated, frequently resulting in minority communities being scapegoated and vilified to create mistrust and promote hatred that threatens community cohesion. If we can, I'd like to just take a moment's silence to remember the people that were killed in the genocide in Srebrenica. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for that.
Thank you.
So, continuing with communications, Councillor Morey, I understand you may have...
Councillor Long first.
All right, no, that's fine. Councillor Long, do you have anything to share by chance?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The
The Cabinet recognises the importance of having vibrant town centres for residents and visitors to the Bay. I know that there's lots of concerns about the empty and deteriorating condition of the building at 60 to 72 Victoria Street in Paignton. It's seen as an eyesore in a key and central location of Paignton. Those alighting from the train and bus station are greeted by a dilapidated site that gives the wrong impression of Paignton from the outset and should not be allowed to remain in such a state. And I know that we've had representations to ourselves, Mr. Chairman, from the person who runs the steam railway in particular. We understand that there are ongoing discussions literally as we speak with the owner about the property, and whilst Cabinet would be absolutely delighted if those discussions led to a positive outcome, if they don't, however, then Cabinet will be requesting that the Director of Place explores opportunities for the Council to seek a compulsory purchase order for the building at 62 to 72 Victoria Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Very briefly, pleased to say that Torbay and Teambridge have agreed to work together and indeed are all but ready to submit a bid for the levelling up bid for a new cycle route from Lowesbridge to Newton Abbot. Both councils have agreement from their members to submit this, and we're only waiting now for when the IT works at government level. Then that levelling up bid will be submitted. So this will be on top of the levelling up bid for extension to Brixham Harbour. But going back to the levelling up bid, it will cost us zero, which is a benefit, obviously a plus. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Morey. So any other Cabinet colleagues, any items they wish to share with us this evening?
Nobody's indicated.
Thank you. So moving on to urgent items. Are there any urgent items for this agenda?
I have no urgent items, Chair.
So then we move on to a local plan update. David Edmondson, would you be kind enough to join us at the table for this item? Councillor Morey, I understand that you're introducing this item.
Yes, Chair, more than happy. I'm asking Cabinet to agree to a minimum 6-week period of public consultation on the next stage of the local plan, beginning in September. The report shows how Torquay, Paignton and Brixham will grow over the coming years, and this update focuses on providing housing. Consultation took place at the beginning of the year to determine which of the growth options put forward by officers were most acceptable. On the basis of the government's methodology, Torbay needs 600 to 720 new homes per year. I hope Cabinet will agree to formally challenge the government's method for calculation of how many new homes are needed, as we believe the methodology, I can never say that word, fails to take into account the significant environmental impact delivering this volume of homes will have. Despite this, there is a significant demand for affordable and rented homes in Torbay. We're looking at halving the government's target to 300, roughly around 300 homes per year, seeking to balance the affordable housing need alongside the environmental impact. This leaves obviously a shortfall of at least 300 each year, and the recommendation is that we will have to ask neighbouring councils to help meet the remainder. The consultation sets out a proposal to focus upon regenerating brownfield sites. The proposal also sets out that some greenfield sites could be considered to meet the demands for affordable housing, but it seeks to protect the area of outstanding natural beauty, AONB, around Brixham. We're in the midst of a housing crisis with a shortage of properties for a growing number of people who need temporary and permanent accommodation. We have more than 1,400 households on the Council's waiting list. We take this demand seriously and are doing all we can to find solutions. One of these is looking at how we can manage the growth of new homes. Let's make it absolutely clear that the government targets are damaging to our environment. They disregard the fact we are coastal and the targets are undeliverable. That's why we are determined to challenge government to protect our bay. As part of the next stage of consultations, residents will be asked which of the sites they think are suitable, balancing the need for addressing this urgent housing demand with environmental concerns. The consultation will seek views on which of the sites or clusters of sites are acceptable to bring forward. It's vital we get feedback from members of the public and members of the public of all ages, I'd add. We had more than 1,500 responses last time when we carried out the first round earlier this year. So we are keen now to hear from all ages, as I say, within a range of housing situations. Having a place to call home matters to everyone, and we need your input to find the right balance in Torbay. Against this, we will strive to protect our green spaces from development as far as it is absolutely possible. Chairman, I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Morey, and I formally second the recommendation. It does feel as if we're, as an administration, between a rock and a hard place. Clearly, central government have set some challenging targets, and particularly with our beautiful bay, it is extremely challenging to find the numbers that the government are setting with their standard methodology. I'd remind colleagues that in the first year of us as a partnership, we wrote to Robert Jenrick highlighting our concerns around the standard methodology. So sadly, government seems to be very much like a merry-go-round as far as the comings and goings of ministers. So of course we wrote then to Chris Pincher, and whatever happened to him? We need to write again to Marcus Jones, particularly highlighting that there is the standard methodology, which we need to bang the drum on. There is also the issue of making sure that we are accelerating delivery of schemes on brownfield sites, because we do have brownfield sites in our town centres. It is a challenge bringing those forward in the economic climate that we face post-pandemic and the troubles of the construction industry. But the reality is that what we need is Homes England to assist us with some of that gap funding to drive that forward. So that will be a subject area that myself and Darren will be drawing up some correspondence to the Minister in the next few days to highlight that, because he was only appointed 4 days ago, so it's important that we make him aware of the challenges that we particularly face in Torbay. So I will open it up now to debate from around the table for colleagues on the Cabinet initially, and then we'll open up to colleagues around the room and equally colleagues on who may be virtually with us. So, and I will be, because of my visual impairment, I'll be asking Lisa to spot for me. So Lisa, what hands do we have raised at this stage?
Councillor Cowell.
Darren?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the whole process of identifying sites for housing is always controversial, particularly when you are really having to stretch the imagination as to the kind of sites that need to be included. The challenge of the standard methodology takes into little account the fact that we have got that big blue thing down one side of us called the sea, and we're also surrounded by green fields and areas of outstanding natural beauty. As you yourself have pointed out, we have lots of brownfield sites and town centre sites that are difficult to deliver. Developers are less keen to deliver them because the return on their investment isn't as profitable. So that funding gap needs to be addressed, and the only way that can be addressed with any serious intent is if the government actually increases the funding and support to Homes England to deliver those sites. One of the other areas that is always a frustration, and I speak as the Vice Chair of Torquay Neighbourhood Forum, is the fact that when developers actually have planning approvals, they are slow to actually deliver those schemes. And there's a scheme in Paignton for just over 100 that was approved many years ago. That also doesn't deliver a reasonable percentage of affordable or social housing either. That scheme is just been a building site or a brownfield site for all of that time, when in actual fact we are desperate for those homes to be delivered for our local people. So we are very much committed to continuing to lobby directly and indirectly, and with the support of our colleagues in the neighbourhood forums across Torbay, to identify appropriate sites. As part of this process, and it's an iterative process, some of the sites that were originally put forward have been removed because of the sensitivities and the value that they have as greenfield sites to our communities. We know that there's pressures from developers to achieve those sites, but we need to identify the ability to deliver our land supply numbers as well, because those predatory developers will come and ride roughshod over our protected sites if we're not careful. So I absolutely encourage continued dialogue with residents and our neighbours, our neighbouring authorities, to see how we can actually achieve the delivery of 300 homes. And if you consider the number of homes that we've been delivering on average in previous years, 300 is probably just about the most achievable level economically as well as structurally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, David, I got overexcited and went straight into debate. So, David, do you have any reflections before we go any further into debate, please?
No, thank you, Chairman. I would endorse what Mike has said. He gave a very thorough introduction, and also what Councillor Cowles just commented on as well. But I do hope that in the debate we'll also touch on the other elements of the recommendation about the other work we'd like to be doing whilst this consultation is going on, because I think that's really critical in terms of the climate emergency work. But just on the points that have just been made, we've met with Homes England again this morning, who've offered to broker that meeting if you as a Cabinet decide that's the way you want to go, with DLUC, with Department of Levelling Up Housing Communities. And also we've got an open door session next week. Alistair Allender, the chair of the Strategic Housing Board, and myself are welcoming in a number of developers, the bigger developers and some of the smaller ones, to say, come and talk to us about why these sites aren't happening, and we'll look to flex on things like legal agreements and planning conditions, so to try and get things moving, because we've been engaging with Homes England on a regular basis and still not managed to get some of these sites going. But as far as the recommendation goes, recommendation 2 of the 6 about why we're going to regulation 18 is because if you go straight to a regulation 19, it's almost like a fait accompli. You're saying this is the way we're going to go forward, regardless of what other feedback there might be. And we feel this is a legitimate way to go to a second Reg 18, as most authorities do. And then you can weigh up the further consultation responses before making your final decision, which will be next year at some point. But I would say that it's a consultation that we've got to get right this time, and it's been mentioned already that we make sure we hit all sectors of the community rather than the predominant over 55s who already have homes that we're commenting on the first time round. But no, I'll come in with any answers to questions later on, but thanks for the opportunity, Sister.
Thank you. My personal reflection is that Homes England are driven around a numbers game, and my fear is that there are often easier to develop sites that will help with their figures of delivery, but we've just got to change that mindset, and therefore we need to be writing to Marcus Jones and encourage that, seeing it as part of town centre regeneration and getting that over the line, as well as working with housing associations who are perhaps specialists in town centre regeneration as well to help drive that agenda forward. So, Lisa, are there any other hands from Cabinet members raise?
Councillor Long.
Thank you. Do you go in, Swithin?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Later on in this meeting, we will be discussing the adult social care health and well-being strategy, which I'm seconding. In that report, it talks about a third of people, I think it said from memory, in Torbay are living in homes that are damp or inappropriate or overcrowded, and the effect that that has on their health and their mental well-being and various other effects that it has. And it also mentions what Councillor Morey mentioned about the numbers of people on the waiting list and those in temporary accommodation. So I think it is important that we take into account those items as well as the consultation. I was going to ask either Councillor Morey or Mr Edmondson about why we will be having what might be perceived as a second consultation, but I think he's just answered it, unless either of them want to expand on that further. Thank you.
Right, so I'll go to Councillor Stockman next, and I also have Councillor Morey on my list.
Thank you, Chair. I don't actually have a question, it's more of a statement really, is because I feel we are in a quandary, you know, because we all recognise that we need housing, but actually it's a certain type of housing that we require. It's not market value housing, it's social housing and affordable homes. And the idea that in somehow we can influence developers to build more than the 30% when we haven't been hugely successful in getting even a 30% out of our developments. And looking back in the history of Torbay, it's been a long, long time where we've been able to actually build up that housing. But we all recognise that there are in excess of 1,400 families waiting for homes. So it's very much an on balance how much of our greenfield space and the things that, you know, that we all value living here are we prepared to lose, because unless something significantly changes, whereby developers are penalised for holding on to areas such as Holcombe, etc., you know, or indeed governments somehow insensitise people to build in our town centres, we are, as I think Steve said, we're between a rock and a hard place. So the only thing we can do is to challenge, but bearing in mind that we still do need housing. And so it is a difficult thing. It's not anything that any of us in this room can wave a magic wand at. But no one certainly wants to see all of the areas of outstanding natural beauty, which make Torbay what it is, disappear. And I believe, David, that there will be significant policy changes within the refresh of the local plan as well, because we recognise that under the MPPF, AOMB has significant protection. However, it's very difficult when it's balanced against the need of the communities living here. So I presume there's going to be policy changes within the local plan addressing some of those issues. Thank you.
Okay, so David, do you want to answer that question? And then I go to Mike.
Yes, that would be part and parcel of our review of other policies, but we are somewhat in limbo waiting for the new revised NPPF, which we thought would be in July, but having heard, as you know, the change in personnel in that department, it may well be some time and it may be pushed back even further, but that will give further guidance on policies. But predominantly it's around the climate emergency and infrastructure and economic policies we're looking at. So.
Councillor Morey.
Yeah, but I believe my question is to you, David. It's only in what you said just now. It was sort of in passing. You mentioned about the work that's already being undertaken, and you hope we would look at that as well. Could you expand on that a little bit, please? If you think it helps with the debate.
Councillor Morey, did you mean the conversations with Homes England and the relationship with them, or with other developers? I'm not sure.
I think the other developers more than, yeah, but no, you mentioned about we would turn our attention to to work that's being carried out now. So if you're happy, you said all you need to say, that's fine.
Yeah, sufficient. You know, a lot of proactive work's been going on to try and encourage some of these sites that just haven't moved, and we are struggling to get them to. But with some of the incentives that Homes England can offer, we believe that could make a difference with some of the sites that we've already got. So yeah, that's the work that's already going on, and with Homes England.
Okay, so any other Cabinet colleagues before I broaden the net?
Nobody's indicated, Chairman.
Okay, so I think I've got Councillor Barron first.
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. First of all, I could ask, even if the numbers froze today, no more people added to it, it would take over 5 years to clear this backlog up at 300 a year. What can Councillor Murray say as words of comfort to those people who could be 5 years or more away from a potential home, where they're living in conditions that are overcrowded, maybe not adequate, etc., etc. So what can we say to those people who, like I say, are potentially 5 years or more? That's even if no more added to it. The second point I'd like to make is that when I was newly elected in 2019, I raised, at the time I was on the planning committee, the issue that I was concerned about developments not happening quickly enough. And I was told by the officer in planning at the time that we could put restrictions on how long you can give people to develop, but it would put the developers off, and therefore it wasn't really a good idea. And so here we are, still with this situation. I'd be curious to know, what do you think has changed now from then that we can actually make those developers, excuse the vernacular, get their finger out and get on with the building of those developments? And third thing, just so last of all, obviously your administration has been here for 3 years now. Could you just tell me how many homes you've actually developed at this point in the style that we're talking about? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. And I think that one needs to also bear in mind that, as far as providing, affordable homes for local residents, this is just part of a bigger picture. It's developing those relationships with social landlords, something that had been totally broken, and we're still, developing that relationship so that they will come and work with us, as well as, the beginning of inroads that we've been able to make through Tor Vista. So this is part of an arsenal of opportunities to try and drive more affordable homes. But Mike, I'm sure you'll have some other reflections around this, and then David, if you could come in and fill in any gaps that would be of assistance. So Mike, any other reflections?
Yeah, I think you're quite right. David could actually answer what's actually taken place in trying to encourage developers to build. But as Jackie said, at the end of there is a delicate balance between housing and the environment. Now, you may say I'm making it political, but I'm not. Realistically, if we followed the government guidelines of 600 to 700, then we'll end up plastering greenfield sites with development as well. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So there's work being carried on about, excuse me, of what we're trying to achieve with the developers. Perhaps you can answer that, David.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Murray. On Councillor Barron's second point about the ability to be able to push developers to try and implement their schemes more quickly. I recall a conversation that probably occurred way back and does occur in lots of authorities, whereby we can put a planning condition on to say that developments must be started within 18 months or 12 months rather than 3 years, which is the standard approach. But it still doesn't make the developer necessarily implement that permission. So it does at least tighten the timescale and focus the mind a bit more. On some of the figures that you asked about, the total numbers for the last 3 years, so in 2018-19, 531 dwellings a year, but only, well, 87 of those were affordable. In 2019-20, which of course was partly affected by the pandemic as well, 188 completions of new dwellings, and that was a 24 45 of them were affordable. And then last year, 2021, 260 dwellings completed only, and of those, 40 affordable. So clearly this administration are very keen on getting more affordable units, but just the least number of dwellings that are being produced are producing a low number of affordable units as a result, which is frustrating. So,
I have Councillor Dave Thomas, please do come in.
Thank you very much. I have two questions, and the second question, I apologise in advance because it is quite a lengthy preamble to get there. So the first question is, I think if any members of our community are watching this evening or watching again later, the first question that they're going to be asking is, you gave us an option, you gave us 5 options from 1 to 5. We had a good response, we had over 1,500 responses, and the report is in the paper there with massive support for option 1, and yet nobody around the cabinet table this evening has mentioned the fact of where our community have asked you to go. So how do we square that circle? Secondly, I want to move on to the difference between Regulation 18 and Regulation 19. We are currently, the first consultation we did was Regulation 18, and for the benefit of those watching the video at home, it's effectively, we're asking our communities, what is it that they want? Once we get to Regulation 19, it's effectively the council stating out its case, saying this is what we are going to do, and what do you think now? So Regulation 18 is basically, you know, any option you want is there kind of thing. So my issue is quite happy that we're going out for a second Regulation 18, and there is conversation, and that means basically we are still at the consultation stage. We have not gone out, and we're not going out to Regulation 19 until sometime next year. However, in the consultation report, there is a conversation about higher density on brownfield sites. Paignton Town Centre is a brownfield site. There is rumours that Garfield Road could be coming down very, very quickly, that the community are saying, well, actually, we're still in the middle of consultation here with Regulation 18, and it seems as though the Cabinet have already decided that we are going with a higher density on brownfield sites, and therefore that appears to be already ahead of the consultation of where we are now, which would come at Regulation 19 stage. So can we have clarity this evening that Garfield Road car park will not be coming down until we get to the Regulation 19 stage? Thank you.
So I'll start the ball rolling by doing that in reverse, Councillor Thomas. Garfield Road is not really on the agenda, and the future of that is not for debate this evening, so we're not going to go down that particular rabbit hole. We can pick that up another day, Councillor Thomas. Also, Councillor Thomas, I think it's quite interesting, highlighting the consultation, because at the end of the day, I'm sure the vast majority of members, all elected members, would say don't build on any greenfield sites as far as that's option concerned. And the consultation is really useful because that echoes where we are in our heart of hearts. But the challenge that we face is what was spoken of earlier, and it's something that you've campaigned for, Councillor Thomas, and your Conservative colleagues, which is the standard methodology, where the government that you have helped get elected is actually demanding that Torbay builds 600 houses
Personal
a year.
point of order,
so,
please.
Councillor Thomas, the reality is that we have talked about, a number of us, being between a rock and a hard place, and that is the circle that we are attempting to square at the meeting. Now, which point of order do you wish to raise, Councillor Thomas?
The fact that you spoke about that I have campaigned for and on behalf of the standard methodology, that is not the case, and I would like to see the evidence of that. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas, my recollection, and fortunately we record these, I'm fairly certain I stated that you campaigned for a government that was promoting the standard methodology. You are a Conservative, aren't you, Councillor Thomas? Thomas, I can't see whether you're shaking.
Sorry, I didn't realise you would like clarification of that. Yes, for clarification, I am the leader of the Conservative group on Torbay Council and as such a card-carrying member.
Okay. Councillor Moria, is there anything that you may wish to reflect on as the lead member?
Thank you. Glad you came tonight. All I want to stress is what was said before, is that we're going down to Regulation 18, again to Regulation 18 rather than Regulation 19, because we want to stay away from a feeling of it being a fait accompli. And in fact, we want to attract more younger people to respond. If I'm fair, which I try to be, the first consultations were, shall we say, the more senior of the community, age of the community. And we need to get the younger element as well, because it's their future. We'll be all long gone in some years' time. So we have to find a mechanism without it feeling a fait accompli to get that younger element to respond to the consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Morey. I've got Councillor Bye next, then I'll go to Councillor Lewis. Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in my heart of hearts, what I would like to see is a prosperous Torbay with the great majority of our residents and those who choose to live here housed in safe and comfortable and warm, or today cool, housing and not in desperate housing need. And so absolutely, I think Councillor Long was right to link this, and I would link this to two further items that are on the agenda this evening, and that is the economic strategy and that is the health and well-being agenda or strategy that comes later. And I'm sorry to say, if we only develop 250 homes a year, you are not going to meet the basic housing need. You are not going to move forward with the regeneration of the bay, and you are not going to find homes, good homes for those people in desperate need. So to me the question is, how did we get in this mess? It was this cabinet, with the greatest respect, who in good faith, and I supported, you adopted a housing strategy with a goal of 600 or slightly more than 600 new units each year. That, I think, was early 2020. You can look up in the minutes, but it was certainly this cabinet, and unlike other cabinets, this cabinet has not changed its membership in the last few years. You are the same people who voted for 600. So how can you now, in good faith, support a consultation going forward where for 5 years the figure is 250, and there will be just slightly beyond that 300 in the subsequent 5 years? Our historic housing performance in Torbay, which is broadly a modern place, where until the railway came in the middle of the 19th century, the population was really quite small. The population was estimated at 20,000. The housing stock was probably about 5,000 or 6,000. Over those 160 years, take out 10 years for 2 world wars, we've developed something like 400 properties, dwellings a year since Mr. Brunel arrived. So to suggest that somehow to do 250 is within the context of the history of the Bay and our capability is complete nonsense. How you go to neighbouring authorities, Southampton in particular, who are guardians of some of the most precious landscape, I would suggest, in the country, and say, please take our housing need, when we know there's been battles over dilapidated hotels, former gasworks, a civic tip, a corner of a golf course, abandoned holiday camps, dilapidated hotels, when we're saying we can't accommodate housing need, even though we've got all those sites, and many, many sites are listed in the documents that you've put in front of us, how we go with a straight face to our neighbouring authorities who are guardians of very special landscapes and say, come on, you've got to take our housing need, when we are not prepared to embrace development on sites where I thought most reasonable people would be only too pleased to see development. Well, good luck to you. I think the key thing for me, and the question, I'm just looking to the document particularly, is how do you engage with the right people on this consultation? So, okay, you say there have been 1,500 responses. When you read through the documents, it isn't clear whether those are 1,500 separate people, whether some people have actually filled in the long consultation as well as the short consultation, had 2 bites of the cherry. So it may well be that it's significantly fewer than 1,500 people have responded, in which case you've actually had responses from less people than are in housing need registered on our housing waiting lists. And we know that there are many, many people in the Bay who are in housing need who simply don't even bother to register on our lists because they know they're just not going to get anywhere. The key for me is, how do you consult with the right people when you read out here 1.4 on page 5, whilst a good level of response was received from homeowners, so lots of homeowners, there was very little response from people in housing need or younger people. We desperately need to retain and ideally attract a greater working age population to keep bright people in the Bay. You are not going to do that if you only deliver 250 units per year. So please, how do you ensure that you engage with the right people? The great majority of people who responded earlier in the year are older people, older even than me, whether they're as old as who knows, but older people who are homeowners, who understandably have said, we don't want any more building around where we are, thank you very much. But those aren't the right people to be in conversation with. So please, 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 how do you ensure you engage with the right people in the future?
Thank you, Nick, for a point well made. I'll go straight to David because I see it more as a technical question about the engagement and how we enhance that engagement with those in need and younger people to achieve a rounded approach. David, I'd welcome your reflections.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Bye, it's the perennial problem of trying to get to the right people in the community. I suppose last time round there were 2 different forms. There was a shorter survey and a more detailed survey. There was also the ability to comment through social media, which obviously people did take the opportunity to do as well. We've now got a new online platform for consultation generally across the organisation, and the team have been trained on how to use that and make sure it's attractive to all. We've also been engaging with the registered providers to ask them to get some of their tenants to look at the consultation responses and try and respond on that, and talking with South Devon College to try and talk to children, to young people, and encourage their parents to be looking at these sort of activities. We've also engaged a local person to help with communications on the local plan generally, and he's got some good ideas about the way in which we might try and engage with some of those different communities. But you can drag people to do it, but we've got to make them actually respond. And I would say that a consultation is obviously just to get feedback. It's part of a whole evidence gathering, sort of evidence-based gathering. It's only one part of it. And for those that have asked the question about why aren't we going but down the same route as what the first response said, well, because we've got this huge housing crisis and this challenge to try and find more homes, and that's why we're trying to get the balance there. But we believe that 300 is a realistic sort of figure, and there's no point in being over optimistic. That's a minimum figure, I should just say, and it's not the maximum, but that we should be aiming to be realistic based on the performance in the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll actually, before I go into the next elected member, I've got one of our officers in the virtual world, David Pickhaver. I understand you've indicated you wish to come in and add something to the debate, please.
Thank you very much, and apologies for addressing you remotely. Just to add quickly to what Mr. Edmondson said, my colleague has actually written to all of the secondary schools to try and see if we can look to engage pupils and and their parents or guardians to see if we can actually work more closely with the secondary schools, possibly hopefully incorporating what we do in planning as part of the syllabus or part of student voice. So we are looking to work with schools. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So I've got Chris Lewis and then Karen Kennedy next. Councillor Chris Lewis.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I can't be with you today. I'm finding it very difficult to walk at the moment, as many of you know. I've got two questions, really. The first one is for Councillor Morey, who stated that a lot of the slack, which will be quite large if we go 300, the slack will be taken up by our neighbours. Can I ask Councillor Morey, when he last spoke to the political wing in South Hams and in Teambridge to find out what their reaction was to taking up the slack from Torbay? My second question is on Garfield Road. I'm disappointed that you didn't give us a fuller answer. The chairman said that it would be discussed at a future meeting. Can the chairman tell me when that future meeting will be? And will it be quickly so that Community Partnership and others can get involved on when that car park will be bulldozed? Because we have a desperate shortage of car parks and we want a one scheme for the whole of Victoria Square, not a hybrid of some and not others. So if you can tell us when that meeting would take place, that would be great. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. And I think we'd all be somewhat disappointed with Councillor Morey if he guessed what the decisions of Cabinet was going to be and preempted them with conversations with neighbouring authorities. In our world, Councillor Lewis, Cabinet makes a decision, then we act on it, rather than colleagues running ahead and choosing to do things in advance. So it wouldn't be appropriate that Councillor Morey answers that question. Secondly, clearly we know there are concerns from parts of the Paynton community around that, and I would hope that we would be meeting in the next few weeks with them to bottom out those concerns around that particular site that you mentioned. So Councillor Karen Kennedy I've got next.
Not used to this system. I'm going to slightly echo the words of Councillor David Thomas, that because I have been asked quite a number of questions, both as ward councillor and chair of the neighbourhood forum, because I think that this proposal does not, I know we've addressed it slightly this evening because I did ask the question earlier, but does not appear to be managing the expectations of the public. In other words, we're carrying out further consultation without the transparency about the previous consultation. So I think we need to address why the public's preferred option is not being followed and give some clarity to why we're going to this next stage, because that's, I didn't feel was particularly clear in the report, and that's the questions I'm being asked about. But the other aspects of the report that I'd really like to see addressed as well, that I feel need to be mentioned, is that is empty homes or holiday let policy, potential of Airbnb registers, been spoken about in other parts of the southwest. There's no reference to infrastructure impact, cumulative impact, and the report does not deal with how we could maximise affordable housing, as our need is not for market housing, it is more for affordable. I think we need to put more accentuation on that and how we're going to deal with that, particularly the most recent issues that have been created by the latest influx, for working from home has, so we're not talking about how the low wages versus the high housing costs is getting bigger in our area, and how we can look to bridge that gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy, and I think you've raised quite a plethora of questions. So I think we'll probably go to a couple of people to address them from around the table. So, Councillor Morey, do you have any reflections on those, and then we'll go on to...
No, I'll go past it to David.
Right, okay.
Thanks, Councillor Morey. Some really good points from Councillor Kennedy, and I think we take that point about infrastructure and making sure there's more emphasis on that. I think there is a need to be clear in the consultation to members of the public why we're going to a second stage and what's happened to their comments on the first stage. I think that's important to explain that. It's planning speak, I know, but all these different regulation and consultations, people assume that one will follow on to the next, but sometimes they don't, and you do have multiple ones at one level, and we need to explain why that is. And the preface that Councillor Cowell and Darling did on the first session about our desperate need for housing and putting that as context. But I do take on board those other points about clarity of why we're doing it, and some of the other points about what we should cover within the report. So yeah, thank you for those suggestions.
And I would also reflect on the on Airbnb issue. There is a government consultation out at the moment, and I know that we're only myself, the Chief Executive, and Councillor Long were having a conversation with members of the industry earlier on today, highlighting how we need to be tackling, saying to the government, because they did move towards having a formal registration for Airbnb, and now they seem to be slightly shying away from it, to be kind. So it is something that we need to hold their feet to the fire on, because it isn't just about taking it. The killer issue is that it does take properties out of the market, then just exacerbates the housing crisis that we have in Torbay. But the other element of it is that it just means that there are less people to do the jobs that are potentially the lower paid jobs, because those people can't find accommodation to live here to undertake that work. So it is, as Councillor Boy was alluding to, having a healthy housing market is a key element of having a healthy local economy. Councillor Cowell, I know that you wanted to come back at this stage.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just reflecting on some of the comments that have been made during the course of the debate and contributions from outside of the Cabinet. I mean, one of the real frustrations, and it's certainly something that Talking Neighbourhood Forum have been seeking, was a meeting with the former Secretary of State that was going to be facilitated by the local MP, which didn't materialise, and that was about how we can actually start enforcing those developers that have got planning consents to actually deliver. And that could be in some form of a land tax for each, or a levying council tax for each of the units that have gained approval. The challenge is, I think there's not necessarily the appetite within all parts of the government to challenge the developers, because a lot of those developers are the friends of some of those senior members of the current ruling party. Some of the other things, of course, in terms of what this administration have been driving forward in terms of providing homes. Just recently we approved the £10 million to go and support the purchase of 37 units of varying sizes to support people in the housing crisis and temporary accommodation. Tor Vista has been set up, and that took longer to get established than any of us would have wished, partly because of delays of the pandemic. But Tor Vista are looking at developing, they're now back on site in terms of Totnes Road. We've got St Kilda's coming, we've got Tor Marine, and there are various other projects that Tor Vista will be looking at developing. We're talking about the planning process for Preston Down Road. And of course, we talk about Crossways. There was a unanimous decision at full council in October 2019 to progress that project, and indeed at the planning committee in July 2020 it was approved without any letters of representation opposing the demolition of Crossways. So those are live projects, and just because we're in a Regulation 18 or Regulation 19 process, the world doesn't stop. We have to continue in developing those sites and seeking agreements with developers and registered providers and Homes England to get some of those sites over the line, such as Devonshire Park and Hollicombe. It's not the council's doing that those private developments haven't been delivered. But in recent months, I know David Edmondson and other colleagues have been working extremely hard with Homes England on delivery on some of those sites, specifically Hollicombe. And in terms of, you know, the pace of delivery, when the Victorians started building out and they started building their fancy villas in Torquay, we've run out of space because over the years we've built on all the greenfields. So the greenfields that are left are valuable. What's left is the need to regenerate our town centres and the brownfield sites, which we know that comes at additional cost. So we need to make sure that we are continuing to lobby and work with Homes England, whose remit, I believe, has recently changed to focus on brownfield and town centre regeneration sites. So that hopefully will send a positive signal and give us the opportunity to get those town centre sites over the line. You know, we don't want to continue the dithering delay that has led to us being in this crisis in the first place because of previous administration's failure to address the chronic issue of shortage on particularly social housing. It's shameful that Torbay's percentage of social housing is just 8% compared to a national average of over 20%. We're seeking to redress that balance. Councillor Kennedy rightly pointed out the issues of empty homes. You know, we are in the process, if they're not already in post, to employ an empty homes officer to actually start identifying those homes that we can bring back into use. So I think there are many issues, and I absolutely encourage that wider engagement, that now we're going back out, and we are positively going to be proactive in seeking the responses from those people on the waiting list, on Devon Homes Choice, and those hard-to-reach people who don't automatically jump to a public consultation. You know, as an administration, as an individual, I've always been committed to trying to reach out as far as possible to those silent voices. And again, in this consultation that will commence shortly, that is exactly what we're going to be doing, and we're seeking to work with a consultant to actually help us achieve that wider consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And the last one I will take, the last hand I'm aware of, is Councillor Long, and then we'll go to the vote. So, Councillor Long.
It was just the briefest point, Councillor Darling. It's just that I was slightly confused. We seem to have had two arguments from the Conservative group. One articulated by Councillor By saying build, 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 and one from a couple of other members saying just option one and no more. There was a discussion earlier about whether Councillor Thomas was still a member of the Conservative Party or not. I'm wondering if Councillor By is, but we'll just leave that hanging, I suspect. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And so, David, thank you for your time. Well, both Davids, thank you for your time this evening, whether you're in the room or not. And then I understand we've got Matt Reeks and also Alan Denby, if you'd like to take a seat at the table to assist. And then Councillor Morey, the next item we have on the agenda is Curbside Green Waste Collection. Would you like to introduce this item, please?
More than happy to, Chair. With cabinet agreement, Torbay residents will have have garden waste collections under plans considered by us and by Swissco. The plans are for a new opt-in, paid-for green garden waste collection service for households. Collected garden waste would be turned into compost. This will be all done locally. It takes 4 months to convert garden waste to high-grade compost, which will have no doubt will have no additional additives and chemical process. Sorry, Mr. Teeth Throbbing, and will be completely organic. That's what I was trying to say. This is part of wider plans to increase recycling in Torbay from the current 37% rate to the target rate of 50%. Through the introduction of garden waste collections alone. is anticipated to increase the recycling by up to 6%. As you know, in addition, the Council and Swissco has just started to roll out its Right Stuff, Right Box campaign aimed at simplifying household recycling with the introduction of a new coloured-coded system and an extra bag for recycling paper. Based on feedback from other local authorities in Devon who have introduced similar schemes, it is estimated that 25,000 households could opt into the green waste collection. There would be an initial cost of 1.6 million to kick the scheme off, and the service would cost around 1.2 million per year to run to enable the new service to be launched. Swissco will be investing in more staff and in more new vehicles. We have listened to local residents, and we know there is definitely an interest in garden waste collection scheme for households. We are committed to doing all we can to tackle climate change and make Torbay carbon neutral by 2013, and increasing our recycling rates and reducing our carbon footprint. We know that hundreds of tons of garden waste is disposed of with residual household waste each year. And by introducing an opt-in garden waste service, we could have a big impact on reducing that. And also by using the garden waste collected as compost, it is a win-win situation. The only green waste recycling option, the only green waste recycling option other than in garden and composting currently available to residents is the Household Waste and Recycling Centre in Paynton, and of course the monthly collection at Brixham and bi-weekly at Torquay. Feedback from the community engagement by the recycling support coordinators show that there is an appetite for this service within Torbay. It is intended that the green waste collection would be on the same day as the residual waste collections, but alternate weeks to the black bin. Chairman, I so move the amended or the new officer recommendation.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I think the new officer recommendation came out earlier today. Lisa, is that the case? Yeah.
That's correct, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. So, Councillor Cordelia Law, I understand you may wish to second.
Yeah, I'm happy to second this. I think it's a great scheme. Just 96 pence a week for a fortnightly collection of your garden waste from your doorstep. I think that's just excellent value. The scheme will bring us also in line with other neighbouring authorities, and to be honest, I can't wait for it to start, not least from the environmental perspective to it all. So just to put that into perspective, if 10,000 households sign up, which research shows us that it's going to be between 10,000 and 25,000 for a population of our size. That's what we've learned from other neighbouring authorities. So if 10,000 households sign up to the scheme, and they'd each normally, like my household, go to recycling centre once a month with their grass and hedge trimmings, then that's 120,000 individual car journeys a year that will be replaced by this collection service. And that will, like Councillor Morey says, that will collect on the weeks when your residual waste is not being collected. So not only that, but for example, my mum lives in Ellicombe, so she doesn't drive. That's an 11-mile, I worked out on Google Maps, it's an 11-mile round trip to the recycling centre from her home. So all in all, it takes us about an hour, depending on the time of day we drive, to take her and her garden waste to the recycling centre. So that's a 17-mile trip in total, like from our house to get her. So apart from the saving in time, over an hour every month to do that, I could be having nice drinks on our beautiful seafront with her, make the best of our wonderful tourist destination in that time. Loads of other things. But apart from the saving in time, this scheme works out less per year than our petrol costs for taking her to the recycling centre once a month. So, Mum, if you're listening, you know what you're getting for your birthday. So, seriously though, I really welcome this scheme, both for its convenience, but also for the environment, our commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030, and all that green waste that I haven't room to compost at home, and I think many people, we don't have room to compost as much as we'd like to at home. So it's going to be turned into beautiful compost for our public flower beds and our green spaces. So I'm therefore absolutely delighted to second this proposal and get my mum's birthday present in at the same time.
Thank you, Cordelia. I'll come to officers in a moment. I just wanted to reflect before coming to officers that, as an administration, we've been extremely keen to drive the recycling figures, and we have been extremely frustrated by the pandemic. And despite valiant efforts of many of our staff, it has been quite challenging from time to time. And only once we got back on an even keel with our waste and recycling collections were we in that position to start to roll out this scheme, and we needed to make sure that we'd achieved that. It talks about late autumn, the start of this. That's at latest. We hope it may be. We're planning it for it to be sooner, but we just need to put that backstop there. But that soft launch in the autumn is really important, because when you look at the top performing local authorities for levels of recycling, they all have a green waste option. The work that is currently being done with Right Stuff Right Box, which is enhancing our opportunities of getting good product through our recycling, and the fact that we as an administration have taken on officers to actually try and drive up people's engagement with recycling, all begins to get to that virtuous circle of getting much closer to the levels of recycling that we know better performing authorities can achieve. So I don't know whether it's Matt or whether it's Alan who may want to make any other reflections before we go on to any other debate with Cabinet. Thank you.
I think, Chairman, that Councillor Morey gave a really comprehensive introduction for the item, so I don't think there's anything else that Matt or I want to add at this point.
Okay. Thank you. So, any other colleagues from around the Cabinet table? Councillor Cowell?
Just very quickly, I mean, I noticed that there was some chatter on social media, and indeed I think from the local MP about the fact it's a charge-for service. It's not uncommon. Almost every other local authority in Devon actually charge, and we will be charging around about the same level as those neighbouring authorities. There is only one that doesn't charge, and that is actually South Hants, but as a district, they're probably in a position that they can cover that cost, but they're also at the moment having major issues with their green waste collection because it's through a contractor. So I think the challenge to be able to deliver it as a free service, and I think Councillor Laws really highlighted, in actual fact, the cost benefit from time, wear and tear on a car, the fuel costs and the carbon costs actually make this scheme a complete no-brainer. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that we are going to be offering discounts to people in receipt of council tax support, and that the collections, as I think Councillor Morey did allude to in Torquay and Brixham, will continue during the rollout of this scheme. So people that would still rather take it to their one of the town hall car parks or the collection point in Brixham will still be able to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Thank you. It was just to say that the consultation on the waste strategy was memorable for many reasons, but the highlight for me was that this item, the green collection, which is in there, is actually very, very popular, and it's a thing that was exciting residents, actually, was the prospect of that. And it is something that comes up on the doorstep very often when we're out, and when we're out a lot, which is good. The other thing, which I'm glad to hear, which I learned tonight from Councillor Law, is that our compost is going to be beautiful. So that's a second win then. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. So I have Councillor Chris Lewis from the virtual room.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, sort of supportive but not supportive. I think there are other ways that this could be done. I mean, Councillor Morey said a lot of people put their garden waste into the normal rubbish bin. I think that is correct. A lot of people in Torbay, especially areas like White Rock and others, where they have very small gardens, it's very easy to lose it in the household rubbish. Whether or not they would pay £50, because although Councillor Cordelia Law spread it over a 12-month period, we all know the main time for green waste is from the spring onwards. I mean, now you hardly have to cut your lawn because the weather is so good. What I would suggest is that we actually use our car parks more, and for each ward, and I think, stand to be corrected, I think each ward actually has a council car park. If we had a drop-off point at each ward car park where they could put their green rubbish, one, they probably wouldn't have to use the car, so that would stop that. I would suggest that we wouldn't charge because we wouldn't need all the capital sum, the new trucks, etc., well over £1 million. People could then put their green rubbish in there, and I think that would give them greater incentive. I think a lot of people out there in the Bay resent paying £50 more for a service that they believe the council should offer. So I think there are alternative ways, and I think that Councillor Cowell, I can see him on my screen shaking his head, but I think there are alternatives to than hammering the poor local residents once again. You know, we're all going through a difficult time. Charging them £50, it may not seem a lot, but I think it won't be an incentive for them to use it and put the garden waste in. That's my thought, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis, and I couldn't more disagree with you. I think it's just completely bonkers, your proposal, as far as using council car parks when a number of wards don't have a council car park. I do struggle to think where there's a council car park in the ward that I represent, or equally in Shippey itself. So it just, like most Conservative policy, I'm afraid to say it hasn't been thought through thoroughly. And we're not, you know, hitting the public. The reality is that this is people are choosing to opt into, and as you know, let's be evidence-led around this. Councillor Long highlighted that when we spoke to the public, they would welcome this. And I must admit that, you know, when I'm knocking on doors in St Mary Church and in the Preston ward, people are saying to us, when are we getting those green bins coming out to us? So it is, you know, I think we will see. It will be interesting how the uptake happens over the winter, but come the spring, I'm sure it will grow significantly. But Councillor Law, I understand you may want to share some thoughts.
Yeah, happily. Councillor Lewis, you live opposite me. Do you really want me to be storing up all my garden waste even longer than it takes my husband to take it to the tip already? Because I'm going to be signing up for that, and for once I'm going to have a clear driveway up the front. But actually my point was I wanted to ask Matt a question, which is, so Councillor Lewis is right in some respects that people with smaller gardens are not going to fill it up enough to warrant it being collected every fortnight. Now, in looking into this, I found out that many local authorities don't mind if you share that facility with your neighbour and you can both put it into that bin, as long as the bin is collected, ready for collection outside of the house to which it's registered. Will we be also letting people share with their neighbours? Thank you.
You're absolutely right, Councillor. Our concern is that the bin is correctly presented outside of the property at which it is registered to.
Okay, thank you. I now have Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as a humble flat dweller with just a few dying geraniums on his patio, I don't really feel that I have a dog in this particular fight. But a Wellswood resident communicated with me, a very distinguished Wellswood resident, aren't they all, saying, would I please support this? He thinks it's a very good scheme. And given that I've been a councillor now for Wellswood for more than 7 years, and I don't think anyone's ever written into me saying, would I support something? They normally write in and say, would I fight something? Would I stop something? Would I save something? I thought, well, this is such a rare occasion. There is support from Wellswood, from this distinguished resident, and he believes it's a very good scheme. It occurs to me that it might actually slightly diminish the nuisance of bonfires. No one's mentioned that. That wasn't, I don't think, in the report, but that is a seasonal nuisance. And I have to say, as I get older and grumpier and more upset when people have bonfires, if it diminishes bonfires, I think that's another good thing as well. So a further split in the Conservative group that presumably will make headlines in the local media, but compared to what's going on up the line, it's really small potatoes. I would like you to support this, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Councillor David Thomas next. Do you have a third way forward?
Not yet, but who knows? Thank you very much indeed. Actually, I wasn't even going to mention the waste strategy, but Councillor Long was determined to bring it up. This is actually a policy that I support. So there you go. Councillor Bye and myself versus Councillor Lewis tonight. There's something different there. So I know this is clearly in the waste strategy that the administration brought forward. This is one that I do support. Certainly out there on the streets, it is an opt-in scheme, and we will see really by the number of people that do opt in. I think it will be very popular. However, as we are still out there talking about on the streets and our waste strategy, we do know that within our waste strategy, there is also a desire to go to a 3 weekly bin collection. I can confirm to you that our residents are absolutely not in favour. The shaking of your head, Councillor Darling. Why do you not remove it from the policy? It's still there as an ambition, as a wish. So just to give you a heads up, we would absolutely not be supporting you on that. But I think the majority of the Conservative group will be supporting this when it comes to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas, and I will reread the strategy. I'm fairly certain that it was completely removed 3 weekly from the final version of the strategy, although it may have made a guest appearance earlier on. So I now have Councillor Hazel Foster.
Thank you, Chairman. And while we're all in supportive mood, as a former cabinet member in Coventry for waste, we did introduce the garden waste 300,000 residents. But of course the difference there was it was free of charge. So just a few questions I want to ask is, in item 3, you talk about using the data from other areas, and it would assumed it would be a take-up of between 15 and 25,000 residents. So, but that data where you looked at, was that from other authorities where it was being done at a cost, or whether it was free? Because I think that could make quite a bit of a difference. It talks also then about the 25,000 households, or between 10 and 25,000 who would be willing to take it up. But how many of them are aware that the £50 that they pay, approximately £25 is for the cost of the wheelie bin? It used to be 20, I'm going that it's now up, and I believe they all have to come from France, so get your order in early, because there's always problems. But how many of them residents are going to be willing to sign up knowing £25 is going towards the wheelie bin, whereas the other £25 going? They are going to be concerned that they're paying that money now, and then you may in the future then deliver it free, and they've paid that money and the money's lost. And my final question is around the report that came out today, and it's about taking out a loan. So as I've just said, £25 to pay for the wheelie bin, £25 to go into the council's coffers. Why is a loan needed? So thank you.
Thank you. I feel there's fairly an obvious answer to the last question, but Councillor Morey, are there any reflections, or do you see them as a more technical question and want to go to the officers?
Thank you again.
Thank you.
While you've been discussing, I've been looking at all the local authority websites in Devon. Teignbridge, I've got in front of me, £50. I can only find one, I think it is, and I forgot where that is already. That is free maybe North Devon, was it? I can't remember. South Hams, well done. Glad you came. All the rest do charge. I think times have changed since Councillor Foster was executive leave up yonder, and things have become a lot tighter financially since then. We would have introduced this a lot earlier, but we were actually waiting on government directive to see if there was going to be any financial help in introducing it, and that wait never happened, basically. So we took the bull by the horns, if you like, and to ensure that we could actually bring this about ASAP. The decision was, and correct decision was, that it would have been a £50 charge, and 45 for council tax relief.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And I think the frustration that we've had is we've had the pandemic that has kind of got in the way of us having the smooth service that we know Swissco can provide, because we're making the appropriate investment in the fleet so that the staff are able to deliver the goods. But as Mike alludes to, it has been a long pause where central government have been signalling that they want a free service. And the planet can't wait for the Conservatives to make their mind up in Westminster. We need to take the bull by the horns, as Mike said, and actually drive those levels of recycling, because it is a crying shame that we're looking at tens of tons every week going down to be burnt in Plymouth in the incinerator to power the Navy, when actually it could be more sustainably managed in the interest of the environment. And now that we've got that even keel for our service, we're able to bite the bullet and get on with the rollout, subject to supply chains. Matt, are there any reflections that you may wish to share around Councillor Foster's questions?
I don't know whether Matt wants to come back in on the point around the data, Chair, but just in respect to the costs, we believe that the costs are circa £35–40 a bid. I think it's £35 in the table. There's collection costs on top of that. In the event that we do make any form of surplus, then that surplus is going to be put into reserve to deal with the costs if government does subsequently introduce any free bin collections. So it won't be something which will be sat in a general fund or waiting for other investment. It'll be ring-fenced towards that introduction of a free service as and when government introduces that.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor. Was there anything else from Matt or yourself?
Not from me, thank you, Chair.
No, that's fine, sorry. So, Councillor Long.
As you alluded to, Mr. Chairman, the beauty of this scheme is that it will be saving costs at the incinerator, so the council taxpayer will be making a saving there. If we were to make this free for everyone, then presumably that would fall on the council taxpayer. Even council taxpayers in apartments in Wellswood who don't have gardens would have to pay towards it. So there would be an unfairness in that. But presumably we've heard a manifesto commitment from the Conservatives tonight that it will be free, and presumably there will either be a council tax increase generally for it or a cut somewhere else. So we'll look forward to finding out the details about that as the weeks go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. So we've exhausted the hands going up, so I propose that we move to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So we now come up to our economic strategy that is set to go out to consultation. And so, Councillor Long, do you want to introduce this? And can I thank Alan and Matt for their time this evening? And is it Alan and who may it be? Carl, if both of you could be with us at the table, please lead on, Councillor Long.
Alan looked very excited then when he thought he had a pass on this next item, but never mind. Yes, I'm delighted to propose the draft Economic Growth Strategy 2022 to 2030, which will provide direction for the Council and partners in terms of economic development. As you've just mentioned, Mr. Chairman, Cabinet is being asked to approve the draft strategy and action plan for public consultation, so we're not making the final decision tonight. The Torbay Council and TDA have been delivering the economic repositioning plan for 2 years as a response to the pandemic, and whilst much of that plan is still relevant, now is the time to have a new strategy to address the challenges thrown up by COVID, but also build upon our economic successes and drive Torbay forward and address the challenges that we face as well. The new strategy is based upon evidence, and the evidence-based document can be found in Appendix 1 of the report. The strategy is delivering a longer-term document to 2030 with shorter actions that will be reviewed regularly. A review of the evidence base has been carried out by Dayton Bell, an economic development consultancy, and they have consulted with key stakeholders across Torbay Council, including the high-tech cluster and the business forum. And there have been 50 responses to a questionnaire and also one-to-one meetings. So to use the horrible phrase that is the phrase of the day, it has been co-produced. There are 4 priority areas identified in the strategy: supporting innovators, entrepreneurs and business owners, including social enterprises, and develop programs and projects to ensure Torbay offers the conditions for businesses to thrive. Secondly, build on Torbay's economic successes. Tourism, fishing and photonics are the economic bedrock for Torbay, and this strategy looks to build on these foundations which are positive, which also provide employment and growth. Thirdly, helping our community and residents to fulfill their economic potential and have an inclusive economy. The strategy will look to create the social as well as economic prosperity that ensures everyone can achieve their full potential. And we might discuss this further during this discussion, Mr. Chairman, I suspect. And finally, maximising the economic value of our natural capital. Torbay is a wonderful place to live, and we can make more of that. And it's an attractive place for business people to come and base their business, but also to have the lifestyle that many other places would envy. One of the administration's first actions was to declare a climate emergency, and this strategy contributes to that by working towards net zero emissions, supporting businesses to adapt climate neutral policies and practices, and ensuring that any intervention supports improvements to air quality and health. More on the way that this strategy helps with climate change can be found on page 204 of the report. So that's just a quick canter through, but happy to propose the recommendation in item 3. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Cowell, I understand you may wish to second.
Thank you, Chair. And it's not a lot more to add to Councillor Long, but I think when you look at some of the statistics in the report, in terms of the worsening situation of deprivation in Torbay, with 27.4% of the population living in the country's most deprived areas, I think this actually provides evidence as to why it's absolutely imperative that we seek to realign the economic strategy, particularly in a world post-COVID. Clearly, we have some successes in Torbay in terms of our ongoing tourism. That's why we still have our ambition of making Torbay the premier resort. Fishing is extremely successful in Brixham, hence the reason we're looking at securing further funding to be able to expand the fish market and to secure the future of that industry in Torbay and Brixham in particular, but also in particular with the high-tech sector and photonics and the success that we're having and becoming internationally renowned for that sector. But we need to do more, and I would absolutely encourage not just the business community to engage in this consultation, but those from other sectors as well, particularly those who are actually helping support those people who are deprived and those people who are attending food banks, and the opportunities that they may wish to contribute to expand on the impact that the economic regeneration strategy might have on their work. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cowell. Are there any Cabinet members who may wish to comment at this stage?
Nobody's indicated, Chair.
Okay, any other comments from in the virtual or real room, Lisa?
You have Councillor By and Councillor Chris Lewis.
We'll go to Councillor Lewis first then.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and we welcome this report, and obviously it is so vital that we improve the sort of business community, the better paid jobs, everything that would make Torbay not only a premier resort, but a resort that is known for certain industries. And I'm pleased that the high-tech industry and the work the TDA and others have done to build up that side following the demise of Nortel. And the more that we can do that. My worry is, over the last few years, is that there's been a number of occasions where employment land has been given up for housing or other uses. And in the report, it does state how important the employment land is. If we are to build on the high tech, if we are to build and hopefully get companies to relocate from Exeter, from other areas in the country, we need that land. We had the debate earlier about housing. Housing is important, but alongside of the housing is employment land, because we want the jobs to go with the housing. So I welcome the report, but I hope that it is noted from the administration, from the planners, how important employment land is to Torbay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. We'll just take that as read, and then Councillor By. Yeah, I'll go to Councillor By and then I'll come back to Councillor Long.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And my concern is, given how stark, and that's the word that Mr. Alan Denby has used when we discuss the evidence base, given how stark the evidence base is in describing our economic woes in Torbay, my concern is whether this strategy, which I believe is going out for consultation, so hopefully it can be turbocharged, whether it is in fact bold enough. So the big things that we must all appreciate: number one, we have an ageing population. We have reached the stage in the Bay where a majority of our population are aged over 50, and our working age population shrinks. I'm not aware that that is replicated in any major urban area. We're out of step with the rest of the southwest, leave alone the national figures. So we have an ageing population, we have a shrinking working age population, so there are fewer people around, and I suspect that the decision that was made earlier this evening rather undermines this strategy, because you're not going to grow that working age population if you don't have places for people to live. So there's this shrinking working age population. When you look at that working age population, it is pretty much low skill, and the latest figures seem to be more alarming. We seem to be going in the wrong direction. So we have a contracting working age population. That working age population is low skilled, and then when you look at the makeup of our economy, predominantly people who work are working part-time, or exceptional numbers are working part-time, and they are working in low-value areas of the economy. So the question is this bold enough? It reads to me that it is same old, same old. I applaud what's been achieved with the photonic centres. Several of us went to have a look at that. Councillor Foster, you were there, and we went and had a visit. I think that's a great way forward. Up at just this side of Roselands, not at White Rock, the employment place that came to fruition a couple of years ago at Claylands and down on the waterfront at Brixham in the former AstraZeneca premises. You know, there are little nuggets. There are nuggets of gold. But talking about an extra 1,500 jobs in tourism as a goal in your economic strategy, and that's what's contained in this report, when we haven't got enough people to fill potentially high-value jobs, I really question the ambition of having another 1,500 full-time employment jobs in tourism, which is traditionally a low-value area. We should be building our working age population. We should be working with the college and other providers and maybe revive the ambition for a university in South Devon. That would be a game changer to increase the skills of our working age population, and we need to try and get those people who are here of working age and higher skilled in high value areas. That is not spelt out. The very least, can I please suggest, there is at least a scoring matrix of some sort. It's a bit of a woolly report. It's interesting that for tonics, you're looking at the jobs and assessing the gross value added. Fishing, you're looking at the jobs and you're just valuing the quantity and value of the catch. In tourism, you're just looking at bed numbers or visitor numbers. There's no common scoring matrix to see where the value in the economy is and see where in the future we should best invest, to see where the returns are. So can we please have a bolder strategy, and can it please have an emphasis on high value employment, growing the working age population and increasing the skills of our working age population? That is the only way forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bye, and good points well made. Councillor Long, would you share your thoughts? And then I've been amiss and not gone to the officers, so I'll go to the officers for any thoughts on this or the general debate so far, or any elements of the report that they wanted to particularly share with us. So, Councillor Long.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I find myself agreeing with Councillor Bye very much. I don't think we've quite finalised our candidates for Wellswood yet, but maybe we'll speak to him after this. But in terms of, first of all, support for high tech, I'm very pleased because I remember it's either a year ago or 2 years ago, I can't remember, time flies so much, that we were being criticised for supporting a business to relocate to Epic, being warned not to do it. But now we're receiving support for focusing on high tech. So I believe there's a question to full council about that, so I won't delve into it too much. But we quite right, we do recognise, council, by the need for employment space, and there is a bid going to levelling up, I believe, for employment space in Paynton. So we absolutely recognise that, and I've been saying that for many times. I slightly disagree with Councillor Bye about boldness. We are doing things that many councils aren't doing. A lot of it's, I know Councillor Bye likes big, shiny project, mayoral visiony type things, but there is work going on which other councils aren't doing, such as community wealth building and working with partners to ensure that more of the social value stuff, which is more about making sure that public sector partners and ourselves and organisations such as the Health Trust and the College ensure that more of the money that is spent in the Bay stays in the Bay, so using local, making sure that local suppliers are included on tenders, etc. And not many councils are doing that, so that's kind of bottom-up stuff, which I would argue is bold. And we're also building our bedrock industries and trying to make sure, and we had this discussion about the destination management plan as well, making sure that our tourism industry is spread over 12 months rather than the 6 weeks, and so that people can have a career of it, and rather than just having seasonal part-time jobs. So that's what I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman. I don't know whether Carl or Alan wanted to include any more.
Yeah. Carl or Alan, any thoughts you may wish to share?
Yes, please, Chair. I'd just like to come back to paragraphs 1.3 and 1.6 of the covering report. Councillor Bye has set out, I've used the word stark, I think, in the overview and scrutiny session. I would completely stand by that. The evidence base which is in front of you does paint what is a bit of a mixed picture, but if you look at some of the more challenged data sets, they really do say that our community needs support. And that links directly into what's in paragraph 1.6 and the timescale for the strategy. We've deliberately set out with this a different timescale, recognising that we need to have a sustained long-term focus on the economy, and this needs to extend not just within the council but across the community. So there is a real need to make sure that our more of our leading businesses in whatever sector, but the high value sector especially, that they contribute to the development of this strategy, they contribute to the leadership of the strategy and the delivery of the strategy within the community. One aspect which isn't fully covered within the report, I think, is also though something which we need to bear in mind in real world, and it speaks to the challenge around ambition. We are going to see local authority budgets come under increasing pressure in the medium term. We need to recognise that we won't be able to do everything that we want to be able to do. But there does need to be that recognition from, in my view, from members across the chamber that this is something which we should have, if not as the central mission, then one of our most central missions for the council and for the community in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So, Lisa, I don't think there are any other hands.
Nobody's
So
indicated.
it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So we will take a 5-minute break because I'm aware that... Yeah, so is that 25 past or...
10 past, Chairman.
10 past, okay, thank you. So we'll come together in 5 minutes' time. Lincoln, if you could join us at the table, that'd be great, as we're considering the Turning the Tide on Poverty item. So, Councillor Jackie Stockman, would you like to introduce this one, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this item is to be approved. To my memory, it started some time ago, pre-pandemic, and the Task and Finish group of the Overview and Scrutiny concentrated on how Torbay fared in relationship to the Marmot report, Fair Society and Healthy Lives. This report was 10 years on from his first report and showed that the inequalities had become wider. His subsequent report, Build Back Fairer, which came out due to the COVID pandemic, was also used in coming to their decision making regarding 13 priority proposals made to Cabinet. The responses are included in the report. Chair, I'm not going to read all of the responses that we've done. I would just like to read a couple of responses which I think are most relevant, and they are 3 and 4, because it's all about, so one of the proposals was to identify any additional resources required to take forward the 13 priority actions and to prioritise the actions and resources to implement the changes which can be made quickly and have positive outcomes for the benefit of those who need support the most. And the Cabinet's response, as the details of the resourcing plan will be developed as the priority actions are costed. Some actions do not require new funding but are dependent on existing staff responding in new and more coordinated ways. The council redesign process has developed an improved front door for financial hardship, and work is ongoing to review how mechanisms can be embedded to ensure holistic assessment, to also understand why people need assistance and preventative activity to manage these needs. And then the other really important one for me was regarding to agree a timeline for delivery of all the actions. And our response is priority actions are being taken over the next 6 months to manage the acute needs and to ensure resilience as people enter the winter months, when the impact of fuel poverty will be most critical. Other actions will be delivered over the medium term, up to 18 months. The full impact of new strategies will be delivered in 2024 and 2025. And I'm sure that Lincoln has got something to say in wider to inform us all, although I have read it all, I can assure you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie, and I'm very happy to second this. It is, turning the tide on poverty is the strapline that we coalesced around as a partnership between the Independents and Lib Dems. And whilst it has been tough times, both with the pandemic and equally now with the cost of living crisis, it is, very, bumpy ground that we do face. But, as a local authority that has suffered more than £500 million of cuts to our budget, and in comparison have £96 million less in our budget, it is that uphill struggle to tackle this. But the reality is the only way you can tackle many of these issues is by working in partnership with others, and that was really positive for me, the way that we were able to do this approximately a month ago at the Church of the Assumption on Abbey Road, where there was members of the Cabinet and members of the senior leadership team who came together with about 25 church leaders from across Torbay, and we unpacked this and shared some of the ways that we could be working together to try and tackle some of these hairy, scary issues that are before us. Lincoln, I'm sure you've got some reflections yourself from the public health perspective, so if you'd care to share, we'd be very grateful.
Thank you so much, Councillor Darling and Councillor Stockman. I think that this report serves as a really good bridge between the discussions around the economic strategy and the health and well-being strategy, which is the next item. And to some extent, focuses our attention on the poorest among us. And I agree that we need to grow our economy. There are certain things that we need to do about high value, etc. But we also have to make sure that that growth benefits those who often have borne the brunt of several shocks to the economy. So we've had austerity that nationally saw the emergence of food banks in a way that we hadn't seen before. This was even before COVID. You then had COVID, which came along and knocked people's resilience, and now on top of that you have a cost of living crisis. And it's quite interesting that a lot of our focus has been on food banks and feeding people, and strategies that people might adopt around food as a key budget item. But actually, going back to our previous debate, the two biggest items of expenditure in the typical household are housing and transport. Food comes the third. And so to some extent, a lot of these people who are the focus of our work, they have done most of the kinds of adjustments in terms of disposable income and what we might call luxuries and food adjustments and so forth. A lot of that, quite frankly, happened, and they've told us through the workshops that we had, a lot of that happened quite a while ago, even before COVID. So we have to be careful that, one, we don't think that the solution is single pots of money, or that we think it's more about educating people how to cook better. That's a part of it. But it is fundamentally about what are the options people have to radically change the expenditures they have to match their income. Yeah? It's not always easy in our economy to change house, and I'm not going to go back through why that is, but we have data that says if you're in the private rental sector, your proportion of expenditure is higher compared to the other tenures that you might have. And we know we've been doing some analysis on the 15 most pressed areas, and we know that among those groups are single households. There are groups in there who depend on transport, so they choose where they live on a bus route so that they can get to work, because often where you work and where you live are not always in a walkable distance, and we understand the context why that is. So our work is trying to inform things like the economic strategy, the work that we're doing on Best Start, we're emphasizing the people element of those key strategies and working together to do some of the work, as you've noted, Councillor Darling, around how do we help people through this particular patch, working with a broad number of colleagues as we address the cost of living crisis, which is our key challenge for the next 6 months, getting people through the winter challenge. But then as the medium-term strategies begin to kick in, how do we keep people resilient? How do we help them recover as the benefits of things like our destination management plan and the economic strategy and some of our other big strategies begin then to see their effects in a few years?
Okay. Thank you, Lincoln, for that. Do we have any cabinet hands from around the table?
No one's in. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cowell.
Yeah, I think I drew attention previously to. I'll start again. I think I've previously drawn attention to the workshop insights and the local data, the bullet points on page 220, which are really quite stark and revealing. And I've already referred to the social rented housing percentage and the pressures on private rent. But when you consider the figures of the number of households in private rented accommodation at 25%, and 60% of those in receipt of housing benefits. Lincoln refers to disposable income. There is no disposable income. It's already negative in terms of their cost of living, and it has been even before the fuel crisis and the rampant inflation that we're experiencing at the moment. So I think one of the other startling figures there is Torbay's suicide rate and self-harming, which is something that should concern all of us, and I know that it does. It's not a political issue, this at all. But we need to make sure that we're working through those short and medium and long-term strategies, such as the economic development strategy, working with our social partners to support people, as Lincoln says, through what I think will be a really challenging 12 months, particularly over the winter period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And it makes me reflect on the meeting with the faith groups. You know, some of our colleagues from the cloth were highlighting how it's less poverty now, and you're moving for some people in our communities into destitution. And I was also reminded by one of our vicars from Torquay how it's 80 years since the Beveridge report actually came out, and it does make you wonder, with all the challenges that we face in our country now. I'm sure Beveridge would be turning in his grave that whilst there are elements of his world, such as the NHS, whilst it isn't firing on all cylinders we may wish it to see, things as simple as housing just are nowhere near being met. Colleagues, sorry, Lisa, any other hands raised, please?
Nobody at all, Chair.
So, colleagues, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Okay, and thank you for your feeding, Lincoln. I think you'll be with us for the next one as well, which is, no, or is it Joe? Jackie, would you like to share with us the health and well-being strategy that's been out to consultation? And then
Thank you, Chair. So, as members will be aware, Cabinet agreed for the joint health and wellbeing strategy to go out for consultation and then come back to us prior to being recommended to Council, and this is what we're doing today. So it went out to consultation. We had it might seem a small number, but 92 people responded to the consultation. The majority were in agreement to the proposals, especially with regard to mental health, which is what you've touched on just now, both of you actually. The strategy is a collaborative document produced with our health and wellbeing partners, largely based on the recently refreshed Joint Strategic Needs Assessment and the Torbay Local Plan. An update of the Marmot Review in 2021 showed that inequalities are widening and improvements in life expectancy stalled in the decade prior to the pandemic. Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer for England, highlighted the challenges facing coastal communities whilst being some of the most beautiful and vibrant places to live. We are not without our issues. Together with our partners, 5 areas of focus were identified. They are mental health, healthy ageing, good start to life, complex needs, and digital inclusion. There were also 6 cross-cutting areas, which are environmental sustainability, physical activity, good housing, reducing inequalities, supporting carers, and increasing awareness and identification of domestic and sexual violence and abuse. The report gives our objectives and priorities, and under each heading it gives the reasoning, the goals, and the method of achievement. For each area of focus, examples are given, some of which are the Mental Health Alliance, which is proving to be very successful, and actually our members are from across Devon, which is a really good thing. And then the Multiple Complex Needs Alliance, which is relatively newly introduced, only not so long ago, went out for tendering. I think I'm right, Dr. Sargent, yes, just recently. The goals and actions laid out in Torbay's Health and Wellbeing Strategy will be delivered by Torbay Council, constituent members of the Joint Health and Wellbeing Board, and partners. Next to each identified focus area is the appropriate organisation that is responsible for delivery. We will ensure delivery by having a lead strategic group for each focus area who will oversee the programme and outcomes. Now, I don't intend taking you all through the report. I'm hoping that most of you have scanned it and had a little look at it. This happens once every 4 years. It doesn't alter a lot, but I do think that this time, through the workshops that we've held, there's been a greater engagement and a better understanding of how to address the mainly ongoing issues that Torbay's had for some years. And so I believe that what we're going to have now is the goals and the actions and the accountability is going to be more prevalent than it has been in former years. I don't know whether Lincoln wants to add to what I've said. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Jackie. Councillor Long, I understand you may wish to second.
I guess you're wanting me to second before Lincoln comes in, so that's good. I'm happy to second this report, and Jackie might want to turn her mic off. Thank you. As the Cabinet Member for Economic Regeneration, I'm pleased to see in the inequality impacts on page 237 that the aim of the strategy is not only to tackle health inequality in the Bay, but also inequality as well. And page 243 highlights the poor, as I hinted earlier, the poor housing and homelessness are consistent problems in the Bay, and 1 in 3 people in Torbay live in housing which is in poor condition, without central heating or of a poor condition, and that compares to 1 in 6 nationally, so that's a very stark statistic. Many people in Torbay struggle to pay their energy bills, and I guess that's even before the recent cost of living. And many rent poor quality housing that is colder and more prone to damp. And housing, as we know, in Torbay is less affordable. economic health and mental health are linked, which is good that this is drawn out. I'm also pleased to see that this report also links to climate change as well. So I'm more than happy to second and look very much forward to seconding this for a 4th time, although I'm sure Jackie has proposed it 5 times at least, but looking forward to that later on. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Lincoln, do you have any reflections?
Very brief comments. Thank you both for your support for the strategy. The one thing that I noted as I was reading through today, the clinical commissioning group no longer exists. So in the final draft, we now have one Devon, which is our integrated care partnership. And the important bit of that is that the integrated care partnership needs to produce a strategy for how we will address the broad issues across Devon. And these health and well-being strategies that each local authority area will feed into that. And I think we're well positioned, both myself and my colleague who is Director of Adult Services have key positions within that new structure to ensure that some of our issues are prominent across the whole of Devon. I had the opportunity to visit North Devon as well, and they have some similar coastal type issues with some very similar housing type challenges. So I think there's some synergy for the new organization to grasp some of that. The statutory functions of the clinical commissioning group are now taken over by NHS Devon, which is the Integrated Care Board. So we will make those adjustments. And just to basically say, it was important to us as the people who engaged, and we engaged quite broadly on developing the strategy, that we dealt not only with the typical health in its narrow sense about illness and illness prevention, but we looked at the context in which that was happening, which is why we have these key cross-cutting themes. The Health and Wellbeing Board now sponsors workshops, and in the last workshop we had the opportunity to hear from our economic leads who came and spoke with board members and wider partners, and letting them know about some of those challenges that we may know about, because that is our bread and butter as we've been doing the economic strategy. But some of our other key partners, like our NHS partners and so forth, need to understand that wider context and their part in helping us to address some of those wider issues. We've had broad-based support through our consultation, and very positive that over time, as we continue to work together, we can make some headways. It's a realistic strategy. For example, on housing, we recognize affordable housing is a key issue, but the focus that we can manage is something about housing quality, because that's the issue that very often leads to things like asthma and some of the mental health issues and so forth. So there's something about what can we pragmatically do while we're waiting for some of the bigger infrastructural things to come into place. Thanks.
Thank you, Lincoln. Any hands from around the table for any further debate on this particular item, colleagues?
Not from your table, Chairman, but Councillor Barnby.
Okay.
Raised a hand.
Councillor Barnby, do come in.
Thank you very much, Chairman. A really robust strategy. I really enjoyed reading it, a bit like Councillor Long. Although I realised the problems in Torbay, I was quite horrified by the statistics, and it makes me feel guilty, to be perfectly honest. I think the strategy is there. As both Councillor Stockman and Dr. Sargent know, I'm passionate about digital inclusion, and I just wanted to have some clarification purely for my residents who are waiting in excitement and trepidation for this, an awful lot of them. On page 249 it says, to make this happen we will. I'm going to be awfully rude. Could you put that into ordinary English language for me, because I just didn't know what the practical things we were going to do. Cross-sectorial digital inclusion group, what is that, and how will it affect my residents, or me for that matter? And if I could just know how the practicalities are going to work. I'm totally supportive, but I'd like a bit more, if that's okay. Thank you.
Let me just find the section so that I don't have...
On page 2.
Yes, 249. Yeah. So there is a group which is made up of several key partners. So as we said earlier, for each of the key focus areas, we have working groups that do the doing and then report to the board. So there is an established group, and they are developing for us our overall strategy, which essentially is about how do we ensure that we allow people to have access, how do we skill people up. So that's a key part of the approach. So as the second bullet point says, get people online, increase the use of digital health and care resources. We know that a lot of organizations, including our own, are moving almost to a digital first as default. And it is ensuring that we understand the needs of those who either can't or for whatever reason won't, and that there are reasonable adjustments that we can make to bring them on board. And also to the issue about including digital inclusion and accessibility in organizational strategic planning. NHS Devon, one of the key work streams for the long-term plan is a digital strategy again, in terms of how do they embed some of the ways of working that were accelerated during COVID. And we recognize that has some huge benefits in terms of being able to access GP and specialist services remotely. But we also recognize that that isn't universally accepted or appropriate. So it's understanding and influencing those key strategies to ensure that they deal with the infrastructure that needs to be in place, but also not forgetting the needs of people. So I think hopefully that gives a flavor of what those words are meant. Yes, we have the skill as officers to say a lot which is not necessarily very clear.
Yeah, thank you. Do come in, Jackie. Yeah.
I understand Jane's sort of inquiry, actually, but sort of just to give you a little bit of confidence, before Lincoln arrived, actually, it was Katie Hurd, who's the head of the carers and sits within the NHS Trust, brought a paper to Health and Wellbeing about digital inclusion and how they might go about it, particularly for people that were caring for others, not just for the person being cared for, but the carers as well. And whilst we all might be a little bit, we prefer the face-to-face, rather than digital, but actually the digital gains for enabling people to remain in their own homes, not just accessing GP appointments, but cameras that actually allow somebody to remain safe at home, even people that were registered blind. It is quite an exciting time, but as you pointed out, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing is how do you implement it and make sure that people aren't excluded, because you will always have people that actually don't want to be involved, but there are people out there in the community working with the most vulnerable that are assisting them right now, and I just wanted you to have that confidence. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor By next.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. And far from it being for me to tell you how to do your job, I just wondered if this evening might have progressed better and differently if we'd had the reports in a different order. And it seems to me that this absolutely on the health and well-being, with a paragraph which I'm going to refer to on good housing, and then the economic regeneration strategy, and the turning the tide on poverty. If we had had those debates and discussions, and people have made wonderful, wonderful speeches, I applaud you all, very, very good speeches around the table. If people had a better grasp of these issues, would we have had a better debate on the earlier and first subject, the housing numbers? Because absolutely everything that we are discussing tonight feeds into that issue of the desperate need for more housing in the Bay, and to be more ambitious with our housing targets in the Bay. So if you will indulge me, and I appreciate you have indulged me quite a lot this evening, and you've even said I've made some good points, so that's very much appreciated. But, you know, Councillor Long briefly mentioned this. There's a heading here, page 14, good housing. Why this is a cross-cutting area. Where we live has a big impact on our house, on our health. A house is more than a roof over our heads. 1 in 5 homes in the UK do not meet decent housing standards. In Torbay, that figure is even higher, with 1 in 3 people living in poor housing conditions. Fuel poverty, damp, overcrowding and homelessness are major challenges we face. COVID has made it worse. Climate change is going to make it worse. It's going to exacerbate this problem even further with increased mold growth. Well, there we are. Adding to the problem in the coming decade. I'm just going to conclude. The Levelling Up White Paper highlights poor quality housing, overcrowding, and this is crucial, and an over-reliance on temporary accommodation for vulnerable families as a key contributor to poor health and quality of life, and a key priority for action at national and local level. Then the thing I've never heard before, which I think is a point very well made, good housing contributes to health and well-being and helps keep people healthy. Every £1 invested delivers nearly £2 of benefit through costs avoided to public services, including care, health, and crime costs. So I make no apologies about the record being stuck and banging on about one particular issue. Until we solve our fundamental crisis in Torbay on housing, we are not going to make progress on health and well-being. We're not going to make progress on regeneration. And I wish that this paper had been taken first, and people may have considered things differently when they supported such low and unambitious numbers, historically very low numbers, in that housing discussion at the beginning of the evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bye. And then we'll go to Councillor Cowell. I'm not aware of any hands being raised. Then after Councillor Cowell, we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Bye has ever raises some really challenging and interesting points, but I think one of our challenges is it's not about the quality and type of tenure of new build that we're struggling with. It's the standard, the substandard quality of a lot of the private rented accommodation and social rented accommodation that actually exists in Torbay. So it's driving those standards up and using our housing strategy to deliver the enforcement that is necessary to ensure that people aren't living in damp and that kind of accommodation. I think we've all dealt with cases of our constituents living in pretty poor accommodation. And I know when I was a councillor for Tormowen, the amount of cases that I had to deal with, particularly in areas like Melville, and that's why we've got the Making Melville Marvellous project, which is aimed at addressing some of those housing standard issues. We're working hard on that, and that should be a template that we can roll out elsewhere in Torbay. So it is about those standards. The cost of private rent as well, the availability of rented accommodation. You know, that's been exacerbated by the Airbnb migration and the fact that a lot of people are actually cashing in on their not right to buy, you know, where you buy a property, buy to let. People are cashing in on those and taking the profit of those, which is further exacerbating the supply of decent accommodation. So all of those things are absolutely right, but I don't think it necessarily impacts upon the number of new homes. What we need to do is make sure the homes that we've got now are of the right standard, of the right quality, at the right price for our residents in Torbay. Thank you.
So, colleagues, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And then we, colleagues, we go on to... So, thank you, Lincoln, for that. Joe Williams, would you like to join us at the table, please? And then Jackie, it again is the Jackie Stockman Show. Adult Social Care Local Account 2122. Would you like to introduce this one, please?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to thank Sharon O'Reilly for this excellent report. It's a pity that she's unable to be here, and I wish her a speedy recovery. Members will be aware that adult social care is provided by the Torbay and South Devon Foundation Trust and commissioned by Torbay Council. The local account is exactly that. It is an account of what has happened in the previous 12 months in adult social care. It also shows the direction of travel. Of particular interest to me, I don't intend going through every single page, you'll be pleased to know, because that would normally I'd be referring you to this page and that, but I've just picked out the things that I found of particular interest to me, is the movement of people from residential care into independent living with care services provided at home. The case studies within the report demonstrate what it means to people safely gaining their independence while still accessing services that they need. I hope that members have had an opportunity to read the report, which is in the main very positive. If not, just read the case studies and it will encourage you to know we are really making a difference to some of the most vulnerable residents in Torbay. There are currently 108 units of extra care in Torbay, and to meet current and future need, there are an additional 175 already planned. One is to be a specialist dementia extra care facility at Tourmarine, and the other will be a multi-generational extra care facility at Crossways Paynton. And I look forward to seeing these come to fruition, as I'm sure we all do. I also like the fact that we are growing our own social workers. This is now done through a fully funded apprenticeship levy, and staff have been successfully recruited onto this programme. We can now commit to 2 to 3 students each year who will qualify as social workers whilst having their tuition fees paid for and being paid a working wage. This gives opportunities to attend university to those who otherwise may not have been able to do so. This all demonstrates that we are moving in the right direction, as local people are likely to remain in the jobs where they live. During the pandemic, there have been understandable difficulties with people feeling isolated, and some have been affected by the delay in care packages. However, what has evolved is a wider collaborative approach, working with the voluntary sector and communities. The groundbreaking front door operated through the Torbay Community Development Trust, allowing access to services where required, but also innovation using the voluntary sector and communities, which assists people getting their needs met close to home, is highly successful. The this is close to my heart, and I know it's close to our director. The Learning Disability Partnership Board have a good balance of people with lived experience and who enjoy being ambassadors, being the voice for others. It's great that local people are fully involved with the statutory sector and able to influence outcomes. Now to something called Councillor Law and I have a particular interest in. It had been identified that more should be done to assist young people progressing from children into adulthood. During the past 12 months, the specialist, and this is the word we don't like, transition team, Cordelia and I really don't like the word transition, close links have been formed between children's services, education and mental health services. There are now weekly meetings to consider a young person's aims, hopes and aspirations when they reach adulthood. The team work within a strengths-based approach, aligning their assessments with support for young people progressing to adult life, promoting health, education and employment. Our aims and plans, and I've put can be found on page, and I've forgotten to put the page number, so you'll have all read it, so I won't need to tell you what the page number is. Whilst there is also there is always room for improvement, because like children's services, we aim for excellence in Torbay, and it's, you know, and it is noticeable when you go to meetings that we all are aiming for that, to give the very best service that we can within the, obviously the funding envelope, which I think we should remark on is that up to now, although the NHS has received funding, adult social care to date has not received any additional funding. So any funding that is required currently goes through the additional monies raised through council tax. So given that we've been through some very, very difficult circumstances, I believe that overall this is a very, very positive response. If Rob Loxton was here, I was going to refer to the financial details and where they can be found on page 320, and also given the ongoing savings that we are expected to make. I believe the achievements being made are remarkable, so our appreciation should go to everyone involved. And I don't intend going through the actual local account unless somebody wishes me to, but I'm sure that our director would respond, although she didn't write the report. She knows all about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Long, do you wish to second?
I do wish to second, and because Councillor Stockman has decided not to go through it in great detail, I propose to. Before everyone switches off on YouTube, I am just joking. So I'm more than happy to second, and I remember when I worked for the Age UK Advice Line, which seems like a long time ago now, we often used to get people calling up who were carers for family or friends. And I remember on a number of occasions advising people who were carers to ask for their carers assessment, which they are entitled to. So I did smile inwardly to myself when I read in the report that the number of carers assessments are at the highest ever. And I'm sure that's a positive thing. I'm not quite sure whether on this side of the fence it's viewed as such, but so I was pleased by that because that means that carers are getting their own wishes and wants and needs assessed as well as the person who needs the care. And as Councillor Stockman alluded to, pepper-potted throughout this report are a number of case studies and inspiring examples of what's happening throughout the Bay, and I would encourage people to actually read the report because it does warm the heart. So I'm more than happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Williams, do you have any reflections for us before we go into any debate?
Nothing particular to add other than the local account is meant to be a sincere account of adult social care for the local people, and we try to provide a balance of what's gone well and the things we need to focus on, and we continue to listen to people to see what the local people, what they want us to help them with, and hopefully the local account sets that out for us.
Good. And I'm pleased that telepathy is working because Anne-Marie, I think, wants to come in and might want to reflect something at Harrogate. But anyway.
Telepathy is absolutely working then, Councillor Darling. So members just wanted to share with you that in terms of an opportunity that arose whilst I was at the LGA conference was to meet with Jonathan Maron, who's Director General within the Department of Health and Social Care. And I was able to share with him where we are with our continued integration with health in terms of delivery of adult social care. And I've taken the opportunity of sending to him the local account that's before you this evening, because he was reflecting that actually within government, they're not aware as they once were as to the integration that continues within Torbay. And Councillor Stockman referred to some of the examples and case studies which absolutely highlight, members, the benefit of that integration. And within that letter, sending him a copy of the local account, I've invited him to Torbay so that we can, welcome him and show to him in person the benefits of our integration so that we can continue to be that exemplar through the rest of the country.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So any hands raised from around the table or elsewhere within the room, Lisa, or the virtual room?
Nobody's indicated, Chairman.
Okay, so colleagues, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So, Councillor Cowell, I understand you'll be sharing with us the outturn from the last financial year. And you're flying solo, I understand.
Yes, indeed. I've got no finance officer support here this evening, but to be fair, the outturn was discussed and debated at some length at overview and scrutiny, who actually made no recommendations to Cabinet based on the outturn report, and therefore we'll be discussing this at full council, so we can, I would suggest, just move to the vote and move it to council.
I understand that. Sorry, just for clarity, if there are no recommendations, there won't be a debate at full council. So to be fair, I think that we've talked about just getting on with it. But so, if there is any hands raised, Lisa, at all, any commentary from around the room? Otherwise, as Darren alluded to, it was well debated at ONS. No hands. Okay, so it's been moved, and I suppose we ought to second it. I will second it from the chair. So it has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Thank you. And that concludes our meeting. Thank you all very much this evening.